Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Business as Usual podcast. This is April 2021's episode. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at businessaupod. You can also visit our website, which is edifyed.co.uk/business, or you can email us if you've got any requests or anything that you'd like to see or like to see us go through or like to see on the podcast. You can email us at businessaupod@outlook.com. We're going to throw this one back a little bit. We're going to go back to our original roots and do a podcast just solely on business news because, we're getting to the business end of the year now and there's just so many good news stories to go through this week. Mike, do you want to talk us through what's in this podcast?
Yeah, we've got four good news stories to talk about today. So we've got the big one, the Suez Canal being blocked. So we're going to have a look at that one. We've got Deliveroo, who this week did their IPO, a little bit underwhelming. We've got Amazon's burner accounts on Twitter, and we've started to see some of the data coming through for UK exports following the Brexit trade deal. So we'll look at that after this.
Okay, so before we get into this first story, obviously we missed the podcast in March due to a number of factors, but the main one being I moved house on the 1st of March, and with all of the stuff that goes with moving house, we didn't quite get around to getting anything sorted until it was so far sort of late into the month that we figured we may as well just kind of regroup and do one for April. So apologies if you missed us, but we are back and we'll be back every month now through the rest of the year. This news story, it's been one of my favorite news stories in recent memory just because of the memes. I have a group chat with my brother, my two brothers, and my cousin, and it's called like a meme. It's a meme group chat basically. And some of the memes that I've seen for this boat being stuck in this canal are hilarious. But like when I actually read the news story and realized how important this small thin canal is in Egypt, I couldn't believe how important it was and how much of a significant news story this actually was. I just thought it was one of those, you see those funny news stories about like, oh, a boat's been stuck. This was actually, this is quite serious. 12% of global trade goes through this small canal, the Suez Canal, and that is worth $9.6 billion per day. And if you reread it, then if you're watching this on YouTube, you might be listening to it on Spotify. But if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it's a diagram from the article which shows the alternative path. And if you don't go through this canal, you basically have to go down basically around Africa, and it takes something like 8 extra days. And so any business that was shipping from say for example Asia to Europe were having if they had to make the decision about whether they rerouted or whether they waited for the canal to be opened. But rerouting, adds something like 3,500 miles onto the journey, which is just outrageous, really. And so, just I've certainly with my class, my year 13s, we've been talking about a lot about globalization over the last few weeks and months. We've been doing theme 4, which is all about globalization and global trade, and so this is quite topical for us. But I had no idea it was so. I had no idea it was so important. This little canal.
Yeah, I mean that diversion reminds me of my first day back at school after the lockdown with all the roadworks. It is a huge diversion, isn't it? And adding on 8 days, that links into. I mean, I instantly thought, the whole stock control topic that can be
Yeah,
quite dry.
yeah.
But I mean, if you throw this in with it, and this happened to pop up when you're doing stock control, it'd be amazing. So if you're doing a bit of just in time stock control, you're gonna have issues
You
with
could
all
do
the
a
goods
critical
coming from the
path thing
Far
as
East.
well, couldn't you? With with a part of the critical path could be delivery of
Mm.
supplies or something, and you just have this huge delay.
But yeah, I mean, it's a big one. It's going to add on cost, I'd imagine, to a lot of goods that were on those shipments. So it'll be up to the producers of whether they're gonna pass them on to the customer, I suppose. You would imagine they would to some extent, but thankfully it's not been too long a delay, has it? Um,
Yeah, I don't know what 4 or 5 days or something like that. It seems
yeah,
like they've managed to get it free, and that it's no longer blocking the canal. But I mean, you look at it. I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures, but like, given how important that canal is, it's not really fit for purpose. It's like a stream. Like the fact that a boat can block the entire thing is quite horrifying, really, when you consider that so many supplies and essential supplies are on there. I remember, obviously, we were chatting about this in that group chat, and so the conversation wasn't very highbrow. It was mainly just posting photos of like the characters from Friends shouting pivot and trying to move the boat. And I hadn't actually heard of it at all, and I saw some of these pictures, and I went online and searched up on it, and there was apparently quite a lot of like live animals on there, and they were genuinely worried that like there'd be a lot of live animals that wouldn't be able to complete the journey. But as it happens, the journey will go to Rotterdam in the Netherlands soon, and I think within about a fortnight it's going to hit the UK, and it's going to come in Felixstowe, which is only about maybe a half an hour, probably about 20-minute drive from where I am. So if I'm not at school, I might swing by the Port of Felixstowe and just
To
and
see the
be
famous
part of
boat.
the to see the famous boat, to be part of the waving party, to sort of see them home safe. Um, Not great for the company Evergreen, for their reputation, I don't think. Having a boat get stuck and be like world news for 5 days.
I mean,
That
how
being
did it get
said,
stuck?
I have no idea. I think the banks are kind of like it's not like a fully manufactured canal. It's
Mm.
kind of like a natural canal. And I think there's a lot of sort of clay and stuff like that on the banks. And I think it must have just got stuck. It presumably was down to human error, right? Because
You'd imagine so, yeah. Interesting. Right, let's move on to Deliveroo then. So so they've done an IPO, much awaited IPO, which means that essentially they were a private limit company originally, and they have just gone public by putting their shares on the open market on the stock exchange for people to buy. So they've faced criticism for their labour practices. So they have been hit by this. So they were hoping to see their share price rocket on launch day to around 460p was their hope, with an original price at about £3.90. But unfortunately for them, they've seen the wrath of big investors, not willing to buy at their fairly high prices due to their practices. So the share price did plummet on the first day to around £2.75. I think was the low, which was about 30% down, and then it recovered to being just 10% down on their opening price, which is um, they sit about £3 now, hovering around £3. So it's been a very underwhelming IPO for Deliveroo, who are
so
hoping to use that for for
yeah,
growth.
that was their fund, and it has been long awaited because obviously Deliveroo is one of those companies among many other companies that's really kind of it's been part of that growth market, hasn't it? That convenience led market that you've seen the likes of Just Eat and other businesses like Uber and stuff like that have really taken advantage of and become huge businesses. Especially with think about the last year as well, how much business Deliveroo's got. But it does go to show, doesn't it, that investors are voting with their wallets about their concerns about this gig economy worker model. Do you want to explain a little bit to the viewers about what the gig economy worker model kind of is?
So the gig economy worker model. So essentially, you're working on a 0 hour contract. You are paid as and when they need you. So I mean, there's some actually quite some interesting YouTube videos of Deliveroo and Uber drivers showing you their average, working day, their shift. So they will work when the work is there, and they'll get paid. I suppose you could say it's piece rate to an extent, technically. So they're
Mm,
paid per
yeah,
delivery, and they're also given quite a lot of performance related pay in that they will be given like quests. It's a bit like doing one of those World of Warcraft MMOs, or if you're on Warzone doing collecting so many contracts and things. So yeah, if they do so many, like reach 5, 10, 15, they will get bonuses of say 10, £15. But obviously, if there's no demand for the food being delivered in their area, then they are not getting paid. So it's a very insecure form of employment. Some
because
love it,
there's no
some don't.
contract, is there? Because I think that I mean that was there was a similar kind of we've seen a big case with Uber recently where Uber won in court to be counted as employees of Uber rather than sort of self-contracted people. And like it's the same for Deliveroo, isn't it? They don't And I guess that's one of the criticisms isn't necessarily that because they get paid for the work they do, but
Mm.
there's no sick leave. Do you know what I mean? There's no paid sick leave. You know, if you or I are to have a day off ill, we would get paid by the school. Whereas if you don't work at Deliveroo, you don't deliver anything that day, you're not getting paid. And I guess that's to some extent what the concerns are about, isn't it?
Yes, I mean you lose out on all the benefits. You'd lose out on, like you say, sick pay. You lose out on holiday pay. You lose out on, I suppose you could
Pension
say, there's,
contributions and stuff
yeah,
like
pension
that. Yeah,
contributions, training development kind of spending. They're not going to spend on you if you're not an employee, are they? So you are missing out on a lot, but you are getting the flexibility to an extent to decide on your hours of work because you'll turn on the app when you
yeah.
want to go to work. So there is a bit of give and take, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely weighted in the favour of the company.
So
So
they so Deliveroo go out there and they offer these. They're obviously privately owned, so there's shareholders who have a ownership of the company. They have their set of shares, and then their IPO they basically offer a certain percentage of shares to the general public or to investors to buy, and they offered them at 390p per share, and that was kind of like their coming in. This is what we want to sell these shares for. If you want to buy into Deliveroo, this is how much you're going to pay. Could you just explain, Mike, how that drops?
well, to start with, they're getting this 390 pence in theory from a reputable source, like an auditor, like Merrill Lynch or the like. PricewaterhouseCoopers will have come in and they've said delivery is worth this amount as is, and we would say if you want to float, this is the price you should be pricing it at. But it's all subjective, isn't it? So the problem is they're not actually launching 100% of their shares onto the market because they want to keep a certain amount of ownership themselves, like the original directors, for example. And they can give out shares, for example, to delivery drivers if they wanted to, or to key business investors they already have. Um, so you're going to have a set amount that is launched to the public. They will decide whether they want to buy and sell at the current price of £3.90. So imagine you are the director. You've got 10% of the company in your shares, you want to sell at that £3.90, say 5% of them, then if no one's buying, then you're going to have to start dropping how much you're willing to sell them for. It's going to come down until someone is willing to buy. So essentially, there was not enough volume of people willing, or investors, I should say, willing to buy at £3.90. And it eventually found its level at about £2.75, where there was a critical mass of investors willing to buy that met the amount of people willing to sell that wanted to sell at that time.
It's certainly not good, is it? It's not a good look for Deliveroo. But yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously when you look at forms of business, the difference between a private limited company and a public limited company, but it tends to be that when a business is looking to really sort of go from being a controlled growth strategy to real expansion. You know, it seems like that's the time when a business tends to go public because they're trying to gain that money to take advantage of potentially good publicity or to gain finance ready for expansion. And this certainly won't have helped because not only does it mean they're not quite getting the investment they wanted, but it also because of I mean it was a historically bad performance. They say it was something like one of the worst performing IPOs of the last decade. It also brings their problems, the concerns that people have to the forefront. I mean, it was a big news story.
Well, I was talking to my class about this actually, this IPO of Deliveroo, because it's an interesting one. I thought it was going to be a problem. I didn't. I thought it'd be underwhelming, but not for the same reasons as what the articles are showing. I thought it was mainly because of the real slowdown in revenue growth over the last couple of years, and the fact that they're still making a considerable loss.
You would think delivery would have benefited a little bit from the sort of lockdown and what have you, with people not being able to go to restaurants, and so restaurants therefore coming to them. But it
Yeah.
obviously doesn't seem that hasn't really translated into profit, which is
No,
also
it's seen revenue
interesting.
grow. It's seen
Yeah,
revenue grow exponentially, but yeah, the margins,
you wonder what they're
are
spending their
tiny.
money on because it's not staff very
You say
much,
it's
is it?
not staff, but I mean,
No,
if
but
you
in the
look at
sense
how
that
much they make, to
they're
be
not
fair,
spending as much on staff as they could have been had they had employees as much as they've got, like this obviously gig economy we mentioned earlier. Like
true,
their
true.
spending on staff could be significantly higher.
Well, I was actually thinking about this when I was watching a few of these videos, because if you're good, I mean, I was watching someone that was doing it not in a car even, they was doing it on a push bike. and they were averaging about £20 an hour. Now, that's not a bad hourly rate. Now, if you paid someone an hourly rate with benefits, etc., I don't think you'd be paying anywhere near what, £10 an hour? So then I think you that gives you a fair amount, doesn't it, that you could spend on pension
Mm,
contributions. So they could say, okay, we'll have you as employees, but you're not going to earn as much, and that does fit the historical model of employee versus contractor.
yeah,
Yeah, a contractor always gets paid more because usually they're more specialist. They're used when they're needed, so you pay for that pleasure. A bit like a supply teacher, for example. Yeah,
yeah,
but you don't have that security of a job, do you? So
no.
they might not like being an employee of Deliveroo and Uber, etc. When it comes to it, we'll have to see.
No, I mean, well, actually, it's an interesting thing because on the subject of relationships between businesses and their employees, we can move on to the Amazon story. So the Amazon story is they are historically Amazon have been known for having poor working conditions for their employees.
Terrible.
There's a huge amount of press about this. It's been quite common. Jeff Bezos, I mean, unbelievably unparalleled success as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, but not exactly like a popular guy. There's a lot of people who think that the way the staff are treated could be a lot better. Wasn't there something that I think there was something about how when since the start of the pandemic, if Jeff Bezos gave each of his employees $10,000, he would still have the same wealth that he had at the start of the pandemic, or something like that. Like, I can't remember the exact statistic, but something shows that they were making huge amounts of money, and yet still the workers aren't treated very particularly well. And so, one step to potentially address this that a lot of employees, particularly in America, are taking is they're trying to start trade unions. So there's one in particular warehouse in Alabama in America that are setting up. They're going through unionization. They're trying to set up a trade union, and that in itself isn't really. I mean, that's an interesting story because it suggests that they're not happy with their rights and they're going to try and do some things differently. But what really makes this story interesting is that Amazon, to try and stop this unionization, have set up fake Twitter accounts with basically people who are Amazon employees who are posting things like, I mean, I put it, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see, but I put a screenshot I saw on Reddit that said, Bert at OK4 says he's a husband, a father, and a happy Amazon employee. Has 0 followers. But he says unions are good for some companies, but I don't want to have to shell out hundreds a month just for lawyers, which is like clearly someone saying that to try and say, I don't want to join the union. If you join a union, you will spend loads of money out of your pay every month just to pay for lawyers that you probably don't even need. The problem is, it's the picture is from the YouTube group Dude Perfect, who just do a bunch of trick shots, and they've used his picture as the picture, so it's not been a very good fake. But the fact that like Amazon are going to those lengths, like they're setting up these burner accounts, really does show that they don't want their employees to unionize, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. I mean, who who wants their workforce to be unionised? It does cause issues unless you manage your union well, and we've seen it quite a lot, haven't we, in the UK over the
Mhm.
last year or so, with British Gas and ASDA and BA. They've all had issues with their staff, and the union have stepped in to try and protect their rights. So the last
Which
thing
is the
Amazon
purpose of a
want.
union, of course.
Exactly. But I mean, if you create a good working relationship with the union, you can get a lot of what's the word I want? Compromise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you do meet and you tend to meet much closer to what the business wants than what the union wants, because the business does have more power than even the strongest unions. Mainly at the moment because union membership has plummeted over the
Yeah.
last decade or so since Thatcher, I suppose. Um, but yeah, so it's interesting that we've seen the unions really front and center of the news over the last year or so, and it'll be interesting to see if the unions actually have a bit of a resurgence in general, because they're very big in Europe, in the likes of France and Germany, not so strong in the UK in comparison,
Do you not think
or
that
the
that's
US.
like do you not think that's following the trend of society though? Where like I certainly feel like over the last maybe 3 years, people are much more willing to sort of stand up for what they believe in. Like, you see a lot of that on social media. You've
Mm,
seen a lot of it for like obviously for completely valid reasons for speaking up against injustice and racism and like I think to some degree the it's becoming a little bit more normalized to stand up and make your voice heard and do what you think is fair. And I think that's going to translate into business as well because I think a lot of these employees, we're saying so solid, so clearly that we won't stand for inequality and in unjust behavior within our society. I think that will
yeah,
stretch to employment as well. I've got some statistics actually. This is America, obviously, which is where this story's from. But here's some stats about the benefits of being in a union. Union workers earn 13.2% more per year than employees who aren't than their equivalent peers, so people in the same job who aren't in a union. So it does boost up your pay. 87% of union workers have paid sick days compared to just 69% of non-union workers. 94% of union workers have employer health benefits compared to just 64% of people who aren't in a union. 89% of private union workers get paid vacation compared to 75%. And union employers are 22% more likely to offer a retirement plan than non-union. So there definitely is like being part of a union definitely does have a positive impact on your maybe not necessarily on the relationship you've got with the business, but on certainly on sort of those extra benefits that we talked about when we talked about Deliveroo, like those extra benefits like sick pay, like holiday pay, like pension contributions and things like that. Um, Healthcare is
yeah.
not really a significant factor in the UK necessarily because we've got the NHS, but in certain countries,
I mean, you could even argue that it could improve your relationship with your employer as well, because you don't need to go individually with your problems
mm,
to the
yeah,
manager or higher up even. You would go to your union rep, you would say, I feel this way. There's probably others that feel that way as well. And then they go there and say, look, it's quite common in among the workforce that, that they feel they're underpaid or overworked or have you thought about changing this?
mm,
And then it becomes more of a less personal kind of discussion, doesn't it?
yeah,
So I would argue maybe it even
mm,
improves potentially the
yeah,
relationship that each individual could have because it kind of gives you that shield, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah. Avoids one
the
person
union
being
rep
seen as a
often,
troublemaker or something.
yeah, I mean that's a union rep, isn't it, who gets all the stick. So that's not always the most enviable job to
Depends.
have.
Depends on the relationship that the union rep has with the business. I mean, sometimes you could find that I've certainly experienced it where the union reps have been a little bit too close to the business and
Oh,
have
totally.
really acted in the business's interest rather than the purpose of a trade union is to represent the interests of the employees and not necessarily. Don't get me wrong, they're there to represent the interests of the business as well because if the business isn't successful the employees potentially don't have that job security, but we've got kind of two branches in this, haven't we? We've got the trade union should represent the rights and the interests of the employees. HR department, human resources department, kind of represents the interests of the business in that sense, and so having both of those allows for hopefully compromise, hopefully agreement, and hopefully working conditions that are better than what Amazon appear to have.
Looking at a bit of trade um, that the UK's had since Brexit, and it's all started to settle down a little bit since the trade deal we hoped that had been signed would
Which looked like a
hold our
good
trade
deal.
up. In
Like
theory, it looked like a
on
good
the
deal.
face of it, you thought like one of the biggest concerns was whether you'd get free trade and tariffs and quotas, and that's been achieved. But clearly, yeah, as you're about to say, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No, it's not smelling rosy. So the first bits of data have come out, and in particular, the food industry, the agricultural industry has been hit the hardest. As you can see if you're watching on YouTube, we've got the graph to the right that shows the year-on-year like-for-like exports of UK beef, which is down at, what is that, about
Yeah, 3.5.
3,900 tons,
Yeah,
3,700 tons, down from last year, January, which was about 16,000 tons. So, I mean, I remember seeing the salmon was down, was it 93%, beef down, 80 to 85% it was down. So we've seen a lot of exports being reduced, and it's not because of tariffs, which is what we were worried about, weren't it? Like you said, Jack.
yeah, mhm,
Um, it's more to do with the non-tariff barriers, as we call them in the technical language in the spec. It's about the amount of effort that needs to be gone through at the checks. Yeah, so there is an interesting graphic which I'll attach to the video afterwards, where it shows all the steps you now have to go through to export one food product to France. It's something like a 40-step program that you need to go through, and it's led to, I think, something like 20. Oh, you've actually got on screen 25% of small
Mm,
UK firms
yeah.
saying they will now just temporarily stop exporting to the EU. And other firms have said, farmers in particular, it's costing them an extra €4,000 per load, so per lorry, to actually ship it across customs wise. So that is going to add on a lot onto their unit
Yeah,
prices,
no
which
doubt.
therefore might make them either less profitable or just not competitive abroad. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's hitting hard.
I've just this last week done this with my year, done this with my year 13s. We talked about four main parts to trade and trading blocks. We talked and like and protectionism and liberalized trade and what have you, and what prompts free trade and what prompts protected trade. And we looked at tariffs and quotas, which are the sort of the more standard, more commonly it's more easy to see the impact of those because a tariff means prices go up because you pay that tariff to export into a particular country, and with a quota it's like it's actually a limit. And so you'd look at this and you'd think to yourself, especially with Brexit, one of the big concerns a lot of people had with Brexit was that it was going to mean that tariffs and quotas would be imposed and our costs to export or cost to import would go up for our businesses, or we'd be set to quotas. And so instead of buying British beef, all of these European countries would buy beef from each other. So it puts us at a huge. You kind of alluded to it, didn't you? Unit costs go up, but it just makes us so, or potentially makes us so uncompetitive in those markets, which is
Oh,
a real
definitely.
concern, a real concern, because that number's huge. That's dropped by like that's 25% of what it was last year.
Yeah, I mean that graphic actually puts a sweeter picture on it than it's sitting at in March. Um, so it's only got worse since January of this year.
All right. So those are our four news stories. We'll put together a worksheet to go through. You can use these with your class just to check that you've paid attention to the news and that you kind of understand some of the concepts that are mentioned in some of these news stories. So if you want to download that worksheet, visit edifyed.uk/business. You'll be able to find this video on there. You'll be able to find a link to wherever you can get this podcast, and you'll be able to find that worksheet. You'll also be able to on there find our spreadsheet, which is being used by a lot of people across the country. So I'm being told, including some very important people. And so that shows you all of the past exam questions. It might be really good preparation for these assessments that you'll have coming up towards the end of the year. Um, Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Don't forget at Business AU Pod. And also, if you want to get in touch, if you've got any stories that you've seen that you think would be interesting to talk about, or any topics that you'd like us to cover in a revision video, we might start splitting those up a little bit. Please do email us at businessaupod@outlook.com. And we will be back in May, which will be obviously a really important month for business students. So we will see you then. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Look forward to it.